is an interview-based podcast connecting listeners with musicians, writers, producers, etc. through curated playlists. This is Next in the Queue.
Hello and welcome to Next in the Queue. Today I'm joined with Carolina Chauffe of Hemlock. Glad to have you on the pod.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so you grew up in Louisiana. How do you think that has influenced you musically?
Well, I grew up not with a musical family, but in a house that always had music playing in it and in a culture that always had music around, like whether that's like in New Orleans where music is always on the street anywhere that you go, or where I'm from in Lafayette, it's more centered around Cajun music. And so there were always, like weekly jams and festivals happening throughout the year. And it's just it's a place that's really steeped in song. And I feel like because it's just so omnipresent in the environment, it's like inherently influential to my work and like the work of any of the artists who live in South Louisiana or grew up there. And I feel like, I always feel really flattered when people compliment my music in a way that they can say that they can hear this like swamp in my songs still. I feel like there's like some sort of undertones of like either mysticism or like resilience and solidarity that I really feel like are like at the core of Southern music and Southern culture. And it's definitely, even when it's not conscious, and especially when it's not conscious, it feels like it informs a lot of the music that I make, because it's the stuff that like was around for the majority of my life so far, just like the creative canvas that I was working with was just so informed by where I'm from. And I also did choirs for like half of my life. So that was another part of it that was less based around place, like not specific to Louisiana, I guess, but just a lot of choral experience in my life is still really influential towards my work in terms of harmony and melody and things like that.
Yeah, I feel like I know a lot of people that are from the South or have spent a lot of time in the South and have like non-traditional ways of like learning music. I feel like a lot of it is like sitting around and someone is playing guitar and then someone else becomes interested in it, and learning from that and learning in like a non-traditional way, which is just like, not having lessons or having a structure or not really knowing what a chord is called or something like that, which I think is really cool. And just so shows how like community building music can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the folk tradition, right? Whereas so much of it is rooted in like oral passing on, like both of tales, like story wise, and of like music, where you just use your ears as the tool that we have. And then less like institutionalized learning and like academia. Although I did like go to music school, it was always way more interesting to me to learn things by ear. It feels more intuitive that way, and you get a lot more like feeling that way, and you can bend the rules or just not acknowledge that like rules exist, so
I was going to say that too. I feel like sometimes people aren't held back by something that if you're taught in a traditional way is like incorrect.
The rules are like, I mean, made to be broken as far as I'm concerned. So,
What do you say, like, what age do you think you started songwriting or really being interested in music since your family didn't come from a music background?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I I mean, I was always singing. My dad was always singing in the house and like kind of making up songs on a whim, just like little jingles for whatever was being done around the house, like cooking or cleaning. But I think I got a Walmart guitar when I was probably around 12 or 13. And then it was impossible to play. It was like really high action, like really just like a shitty guitar. Um, and my dad had got like a coupon for me to go to a guitar lesson at like the local Baptist church. And so I like used the coupon, went to these guitar lessons. And when the coupon ran out, we stopped with the lessons. And I feel like that was like kind of a gateway of like opening up an instrument for me to like use with song. And I like dabbled in maybe trying to write songs when I was 12 or 13 because I was always writing in a journal or always kind of writing poetry. I was always interested in writing. Um, and so I tried that, but then that guitar was too hard to play. And so I like put it down, took a step back. And then when I got my next guitar, which is the one that I still play, from Craigslist for like $150 or something, I think I was probably around 15. And then I started to write more consistently and just didn't really stop since then and started doing open mics when I was 16 at the local bar in town. And, yeah, and then the band that I was in high school started. And so then we were like performing and it was just like, oh, well, there's people who are willing to listen. And that's also like a motivating factor in writing sometimes, which I think is less true for me now. But like at the time, like the like validation of doing that, like as a young person, like as a teenager, it was so cool that you could like make this thing and there were people that were like down to listen to you do this thing that you wrote. So yeah, the short answer is like I was in my, I guess, early teens when I started like writing songs. And then around 16 when I feel like I started liking some of the songs that I was writing or whatever.
Mhm. How did you go about teaching yourself when you were 15?
It was a lot of ultimate guitar, like just, online looking up tabs if I heard a song. I was always interested in finger picking. And because of just like how twinkly it is, it's like you, instead of strumming a chord and it kind of being like this wall of sound, you can like really hear all the harmonic content when you're finger picking in a way that I really liked and like the tenderness of it. And so I would look up, things like Death Cab for Cuties, I Will Follow You Into the Dark, like on Ultimate Guitar, or just like, and read the tabs and learn that way. And so I still can't really read like sheet music for guitar or anything, even though I took lessons to do that in college. I just, I'm like way more a fan of the kind of like drawn out, or like written out little chord charts or tabs. And, yeah. And then from there, it's like, playing with open tunings has always been a way to like just expand and like, yeah, bend those rules even further, like not have to know what chords you're playing. And so it's all intuitive. It's all ear based. And you can't really be wrong when that's the case. And so open tunings have always interested me. And but yeah, the internet is just like was, free. And then I also had a guitar teacher or a music teacher, Chad Viator, in high school. I would get like pulled out of elective classes once a week and we'd have like private instruction. And he was always like just really encouraging with, he was the first person who showed me how to like record on a computer and like GarageBand or, a DAW, digital audio workstation. And he was like a very gentle, but motivating like force for me to keep going with that stuff. And, yeah. And then like the band that I was in was called Shrugs in high school and early college. Yeah, that was like the first time for any of us to be like collaborating in an original music band setting.
Yeah, but Ultimate Guitar Tab was a a vehicle of its time, which is really
Truly. I mean, yeah, I know that I have a lot of friends who use YouTube a lot more, like watching people play stuff and learning that way, but I was mostly just an ultimate guitar head.
yeah. I was like looking up Paramore songs.
Yes, I would play You Are the Only Exception, like as my little like party trick song.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I don't know. I mean, I don't play guitar anymore. I think I like learned Do You Want to Know, like that intro um, by Arctic Monkeys, and I was like, oh my God, I'm
Uh-huh.
so accomplished. I'm so good at playing guitar. Which is so funny to me.
Yeah.
Um, but you released two projects this year, one of them being 444, um,
Mhm.
which is a compilation project that you started where you write a song every day for a month. And you started this project 6 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, you're halfway done with the project. How does it feel, and how does it feel to create a project that will probably span over the next 12 years? That's like more than
Yeah.
half a decade.
Yeah. Right. Um, it feels really good to be at this kind of like halfway mark. It feels like, um, I mean, it kind of is reminiscent to me of those projects of, like photographers who will take their portrait like every day over the course of years or whatever. This feels like it is this zoomed in kind of snapshot of 1 month out of each of these years of my life. And so when I think about when I started this in 2019, I was like still in college, still living in my hometown. And then it's followed me as a project from Louisiana to living in Oregon to living in Chicago and I mean beyond. And so this year I'll be doing it actually next month in November. Because I do a different month out of each year, just based on they're not in order. It's just based on the circumstances of when I'll be driving the least.
Mhm.
At least that's how it is now. But um, yeah, it feels like it's a way to honor my like past selves and like my present self, and also just make myself practice or be consistent because I often won't pick up a guitar or like I won't sit down to write unless I've given myself some kind of um like constriction, like time constraint or something. At least as consistently as every day. I thrive with a deadline. And
Yeah.
so it was a way of taking advantage of knowing that about myself. And yeah, it feels really interesting to see how much I've changed since 2019 as a songwriter and as a person, and like how much has also stayed the same as a through line. And I think that the more that I do this project, the wider open what a song is, uh, like counts as to me. It just, because now on more recent ones I've done just like field recordings where it's like kind of like, quote unquote composition of like bird song and wind chimes or something, or like, playing instruments that are not instruments that I know how to play, but that you can, follow intuitively with your ear. And also like shifting narratives where like not everything is autobiographical. You can kind of play with prompts more if you're feeling bored or running out of ideas. And yeah, halfway there feels wild. And I just like, I feel really proud of this project already. And I think it's been a really, really valuable process for, my creativity and what I allow. Just because like, going back to like the kind of rules thing, there's way less of them. Every time I come around to this, there's like less and less rules, or the box gets bigger and bigger, or like we're breaking the box entirely, of like what is like allowed. Anything goes is kind of how I feel about the song a day thing. And so after these 12 years, yeah, I mean, that's more than a decade of my life that it will be kind of zooming in on these little fragments of. And that feels really like vulnerable in a way, but also really like beautiful in its continuity and like range. And I'm looking forward to like looking at that calendar and seeing it entirely, like blocked out, all like a song for every day of the year, basically, is how it's going to end. So, yeah, and I hope as well to do more of the kind of compilation albums that are not recorded on my phone, like not written and recorded the day of, and are more of like the curated selection, like 444 is, where I can just like with the band, cherry pick these ones that feel like they're begging to be realized in a more like full way, or in a different way. And yeah, like so maybe doing another volume of those, or two more volumes of those at some point. And yeah, that feels like one facet of my creative work. And then like there's other albums along the way that are outside of the song a day universe. But this is just kind of a practice to make sure that I keep practicing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you started the project when you were 20?
Yes. Yeah. That seems right to me. Let's math. I was born in 1998. I'm 26 now. 2019. That's right. Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Girl math.
Yeah. So you started it when you were 20, and it'll be finished when you're 32. And I think it's cool to think about how time passes. And I liked what you said about how you've seen how you've changed, but also stayed the same. I think it's really cool to draw parallels to like authors sometimes, like if you're like reading books or even just media in general, how much human life is like the same and consistent with how other people are feeling. Like if you're feeling a certain way, like sad or happy or thinking about what you're going to do with your life or something, there was someone like, I don't know, in like 1875 thinking the same exact thing.
Right.
Just a random ass here. And I think it's cool because like I think that like I don't know, when you're done at 32, it'll be cool to see how much you've been feeling the same or different.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because your 20s too, right, are like such like this like
So
strange
young.
formative time. Like, yeah, it's young, but you're also an adult, like in the eyes of society. And now like, yeah, just figuring out footing in so many different ways. And I already feel like in that time from being 20 to being 26, it's been, like my integrity still feels really like the core of who I am feels pretty much the same, but I also have so much more life experience under my belt, and I'm certain in 6 more years I will as well. But yeah, it's that whole like merging of your past, present, and future selves, and like finding out how they all fit together and playing with that. It feels like playful to me inherently too, and also like an act of constant forgiveness too for like either the mistakes you make or the things that you don't know yet. It's like a very it's like a patient practice. Like patience with yourself, not just like patience with the craft, but yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows? I'll be in 6 years. I feel like I have an idea, but
I know. I like the idea of patience because it's like when you're younger, I feel like there's more like more of a feeling of being naive, and you think that life will be one thing, and then you're like, oh wait, I'm now 26 or 27 and still feeling the same way. Like what's going to be ahead of me? It's cool.
Yeah, and in the larger, like context of the world too, it's like so like we're learning as a society, as we learn as individuals, and as our planet seems to get less and less habitable, and like just folding everything in like that all informs the song a day stuff so much too, right? Is like outside of my own brain. It's like what is going on in the world, and so it's also like kind of this like feels like a strangely like personal like historical archive in a way, because there's always outside influence. And so these little snapshots of these moments in our human history as well. At least like between the lines of it, you know?
Yeah. And then,
Yeah. Who knows where we'll be at as a society 6 years from now.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
trying to be cautiously hopeful, you know?
Yeah. How did you go about choosing the songs that you wanted to be included?
Hmm. Some of them felt like glaringly obvious to me. Like day one, it felt very important to have the day one is like the first track on 444 and it's also the first song of any of the song a day months. So that's from like the first track, the first day of the February album in 2019, when I was 20. And so that was like, okay, for like the sake of the concept, right? Like feels nice to bring that one back as like the origin story of the entire saga. And then there were others, a lot of them were, I asked my bandmates, Andy and Bailey and Jack, to just like, it was very collaborative, the track listing or the choice of songs, because I wanted to do things we were all interested in. And they all, you know, I'm lucky enough to have collaborators, bandmates who were like already just genuinely interested in like the music that I was making. And so they came in like when we started playing together with kind of like knowledge of songs that had already grabbed their ear. And so I wanted to like play with that and for us to choose songs that they genuinely were like interested in and interested in playing on, because it either pushed them collaboratively or because they loved the song. And so some of them, like Hundred Headed Woman is one also from the February Song a Day project, the first Song a Day month. And Andy really loves that one, I think. And so we included it for that reason. And then I wanted to make sure that we had at least one song from each of the Song a Days so far, so that it is like kind of a comprehensive like compilation. And yeah, there were some like that I chose because I felt like they were begging to be arranged as a full band, like Full and Hazards, the ones that are like more like rock songs, or like, you know, push kind of the volume a little more and kind of get fuzzed out or push us out of like that like kind of folk realm. Those, it just felt like it was obvious for us like to be able to just lean all the way in as a band and totally shapeshift those songs. And so it kind of, yeah, it was like this multi-faceted like thing of wanting songs that we all wanted to play, wanting songs that it seemed obvious could be a lot bigger than they were on the day that I wrote them, like solo playing on, you know, into my phone microphone. And then like conceptually what honors the whole project, which is why like it's bookended with day one and then it ends with thank you card to band, which is just like, you know, it is what it sounds like. It's like a song from the May Song a Day. Is it from the May Song a Day? Yes, it's from the May Song a Day. And that was like just me feeling so grateful for the band. And so it feels like a great way to end the album is by like just saying an explicit thank you to the people who made this thing with me. And yeah, that feels like and then there were like kind of ones that felt like just really fun, like kind of like bangers, you know, like Depot Dog or something. It was like, well, this is just fun to do. Feels like a pop song. So yeah.
And then how did it feel to like reimagine these songs and give them a new life instead of just like living on your Bandcamp?
Mm-hmm. It felt really natural and intuitive, I think, because of the nature of collaboration with Bailey and Andy and Jack, and also because the Song a Day songs are not meant to be, I guess in some ways they're not meant to be finished, you know, like they're just like one snapshot of this like song seedling the day that it was written. So they're like they're in their infancy. All the Song a Day songs are in their infancy, and I just like put them out as they are as newborns, and then like because a recording is just one instance of a song, right? So it's like these songs have the ability to grow and change and shapeshift, and it's like honoring that feels really natural and organic and intuitive and right, to me. And so yeah, reimagining them just felt like they were just evolving or like growing with us and like kind of fitting the shape of their new container. And so yeah, it felt almost like, you know, we didn't really have to think about it as a band. It was just we all kind of brought our own ingredients to the arrangement, and then when we played them together, it just folded in really, really easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up about like songs being unfinished, because I was going to ask about that. About you saying that like songs are malleable and almost never finished. Do you like find comfort in that analysis? Does it make it easier to like move on from a song?
Yeah, definitely. You can't treat anything as too precious. I think like, you know, for most of our human history, music was not able to be recorded. And so songs had this like fluidity where they were changing with time and changing with different arrangements and collaborators. And now we like are in a society where I feel like we're so focused on recordings of music. Like when you go to a show, you know, people are like, oh, well, it didn't sound like a recording, as like a way of saying it was like bad or something sometimes. And I don't really like align with that at all. It's like the recording is just one moment. You're in one room, you're doing this like 3-minute thing one time. And it can be, you know, like in my case, like touring around, I'll be playing, you know, some of those songs in the set list I've been playing like every night for a year, just about. And it's like, how can we keep it interesting? How can we not like constrain it needlessly and let it grow with you? Just like, you know, just like we do as people. I feel like songs have this sort of like sentience to them, and they want to like, they want to bend or like, you know, grow towards the sun or like, you know, change color sometimes. And so it just, you know, it feels like we should let them be liquid in that way, and not be too precious about preserving one instance of the thing, because they can take on so much more life that way, and grow with you as a creator, and with different collaborators. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like the beauty of live music. Not everything needs to be the same as the recording.
Oh
And,
yeah, very little needs to be, if anything.
and there are some like going back to your song a day, which you got inspired by Michelle's Honor of Japanese Breakfast. Like seeing them live compared to the studio stuff um, is really crazy to me, because I think in their older discography, I never remember the name of the album, but it's like the album that has The Body as a Blade. I saw it live, and it's so much grittier in person than on the recording, and it gives it a new life and kind of a new meaning. Or Lily Seberg, they had an album, Alas, and
Yeah.
seeing Waste compare like played solo and then like with a full band, like it feels different each time. Like one feels more raw, and then like the other take harder, which is cool.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, it's so interesting, right? To like see, to hear something maybe for the first time as a recording and then see it live, and it's just so expansive. Or the other way around too, you know, when you like see something live and then you go listen to the recording, you're like, whoa, this is like a whole different animal, like just another species. Yeah, I love Lily. But yeah, and it's interesting too, because Michelle Zauner did inspire the Song a Day thing, and I like admire Michelle so much as a creator, and or like as a creative, as an artist. But I admittedly like do not listen to that much Japanese breakfast. So it's funny too, just like the ways that we can find inspiration, you know, like in an instance from something, like, and then just run with it. And I think like it's been interesting to watch the Song a Day thing trickle from like getting that idea from listening to the Song Exploder podcast, where I was listening to Michelle Zauner's episode, and that's where she mentioned the Song a Day thing. And that was like this, what planted the seed for me. And then I've had friends since then also do song a day. Like my friend Mariah Houston has done it, and Will Rosner. There's like all these people who, it's like this domino falling of inspiration. And you didn't even ask me about that, but it just was something that I wanted to say.
Yeah, of course, include it. Yeah, I love Mariah.
Yeah.
Uh, um, how did you you titled the album 444. What do angel numbers mean to you?
Okay, so this year driving just kind of all the time, but I feel like in my tour travels, 444 has been like the angel number that has stood out the most to me. And like I've, Googled it a number of times where it's like, what do different people think that number means? And I feel like what I see come up a lot is like sort of like divine protection or like guardian, or that there's like, you're like being observed in a way that is like protective. And that feels like both like a comfort to me being on the road as often as I am, and also like something that I feel like I'm doing and that the band is doing with our like songs, like that what we're doing with our creation. And I think more than that, it was just kind of a it was kind of a cop out to title the record that, because I really don't like naming things. Like, I don't like that this project even has to have a name. Like, and so I often, like, hemlock comes from just a word that was presenting itself to me over and over and over again, and letting the meaning come from that, like, presentation. And so 444 was a way to be like, okay, well, we'll just let numerology kind of decide everything about this album. Like, 444 adds up to 12, which is the 12 like tracks that are on it, and also the 12 months of the song a day thing. And there's 4 members of the band, and there's 444 as an angel number that's recurring in my environment. And it also determined like when the singles were released, and like when the album release show is, and when the album release date was. Like 10/11 was the album release, so 10/11/12 is Succession. And then like the full band releases on 12/12/24. This is getting like really long-winded and tangential, but that is just to say, like, naming the album an angel number was not even necessarily centered around the angel number itself. It was just like the path of least resistance again, and comes from also my like not enjoying naming things at all, because names feel, I guess, like they can be really weighted or like limiting in some way. But 444 was a way to feel playful about it, and also acknowledge this kind of like protective energy both around me as a person from whatever outside forces, and also from me to the work that we made on the album.
I think naming things is really hard because it's like, you know how you feel about something, and you know if something's done, but like naming it, yeah, is like giving it a finality, which is a strange thing. And I also
Right.
go ahead.
You carry on. You do it.
Yeah, it's like, but also at the same time, I feel like it's very thought out, because like I didn't even think about the dates presented, 10/11/12 That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think anyone thought about those things except for my little rat brain. Like the singles too, like a lot of the days the singles came out, either the numbers added up to 12, or like I was like squinting my eyes and tilting my head in all these crazy ways to make it all make sense, because I just didn't want to have to make so many decisions on my own about the rollout of everything, the timeline. Yeah.
And you record this album in 2 days. How did it feel to like crank these songs out so fast?
I feel like the band, this Hemlock band with Bailey and Andy and Jack, it's like we're all pretty busy and largely unavailable. And so since we started playing together, a lot of what we've done, whether that's rehearsing or playing shows or recording, in this case, this is the first time we recorded together, has had to be some like intensive burst of time, like if we can only record once before or rehearse once before a show, it has to be this like 5-hour rehearsal where we like just do everything 2 times and then like or 3 times and call it. And so some of it was just it was out of necessity, but a necessity that we were used to working with, of like our lack of available time in the schedule, the lack of available hours in the day, because everyone is playing in other projects and doing so much. I mean, yeah, Bailey's in Frico and free range, Jackson free range, Andy's in free range. We share the same like backing band, or we share the same band. Sophia and I are the only difference in personnel there. We like absorbed each other's bands over the past couple of years, and then yeah, Bailey's been, like going to Japan and touring nonstop this year. And Jack is always recording things and doing production and playing drums and other projects like Phenom and VV Lightbody. And, but that all is to say that doing the album in this like 2-day intensive pocket of time, the week before I moved away from Chicago, felt like it was the only window. And so we're good at like working with that window of time that we are given, or that we did carve out very intentionally, and then like pushing it kind of as hard as we can in that time to get everything done. And we did already like have all the songs arranged. It wasn't like we were going into the studio being like, I wonder what songs we're going to do today. Or like, I wonder, like our arrangements were already mostly all there. Mm-hmm. And so it was more about just like capturing them in a way that was true to how we'd been playing them live, and also how we wanted them to be presented after. And it was like, I think we all were going through a kind of emotionally intensive time as well. I was like not doing very well last November when it was recorded. I was going through a lot of personal transition, and I think that a lot of us in the band were feeling very like running on steam, running on fumes, overworked. And so we kind of like it felt like we were using the last of the energy that we had to like just put it all into this record. And so there's like a feeling of kind of urgency and intention and intensity to the album that serves it really well. And I also feel like really proud of what we were able to do in the like state that we were kind of all in. And also it was like a relief, like with each of us kind of going through different things at the time. It was like we found this like balm in being able to make music with each other. It was like an escape in some ways, or like a holding, like a true like kind of cradle of like this community and this like creative just like collaboration. And so yeah, we used every second as fully as we possibly could, and ended up with this 12-song album. And then there were like 1 or 2 days where in my absence, Jack, total champion, MVP, recorded like overdub stuff with Bailey and with Andy, without my being present at all. And so that was like a beautiful act of trust as well. It was like to put all the kind of finishing touches on it, extra harmonies and a few extra things that weren't live tracked on there without my even like having to be there to give any kind of guidance or direction. Like I just because I don't feel like I'm necessarily the director of that project. It was like we all have so much say in what we want it to look like creatively. And recording that in 2 days was nuts. We were all pretty spent at the end, but we were also spent going into it. And so part of me felt like I left more revitalized, even though I had like less energy. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. You talk about community a lot. How do you think other musicians should and can go about creating it where they live?
I think this is okay. Yeah, this is a big question, and I'm a long-winded answer, so I'm going to try to keep it succinct and not too windy. But I think that there's a need right now for community spaces that are not just like, like 200, 300 cap venues and stuff like across the board. I think that the more musicians can open their doors to like having house shows or backyard shows or alternative show spaces. That's like such a way to foster community that then takes it out of this kind of like industry setting that is often like centered around like alcohol sales, or there's like ulterior motives, you know, like from a space. Like venues are great, they can be great. I have like a handful of venues that I really love playing at in this country, but I also think that returning music to the home is like a really powerful and empowering thing, and also can show people that like music can be in any space, you know, like it can be this omnipresent thing that is in in our entire environment, instead of just in these like specific spaces where we've like been accustomed to observing them. And I think that also just like all of us sharing our resources, and being more open to like trading our time than having to necessarily like pay each other out for like things like collaboration or whatever, you know, like almost like going back to more of like a barter economy type thing, like can really pay off when we're all like so strapped for cash anyway all the time. You know, it's like, how do we want to use our time if most of us are all going to still be poor anyway? Like what can our time be bought for, and what are ways around that? And I think like, you know, the less gatekeeping, the less kind of like exclusivity around our contacts that we have, like our friends, whether that's a venue or a band or, you know, like a music writer or whatever, the better, theoretically, because then we're all just like building that community and like sharing it, and there's like less of a hierarchy involved there. And yeah, I think, I mean, and it creates like it just creates a more inclusive environment, like inherently. But yeah, I don't know if I should just end it there, because I could ramble on about it for a very long time, but maybe that answers some of the question.
I've lived in New York now for 3 years, and I think I found a lot of people that are like willing and wanting to work with each other. And it's like really cool to see, especially with like even artists that you don't think are related to one another, still helping out, like going to each other's shows. And I don't know, I feel like I've gone to a couple of house shows. Like one of the house shows I went to, you performed at with Mariah.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe there are house shows going on, and I'm just too old to know about them.
Well, like that's another thing, is like we need to, like, I feel like I've heard that sentiment a couple times of like people feeling like they aged out of like the knowledge of being aware of where the house shows are, and I'm like, no, like I want to push back against that so hard. I want all house shows to feel like they're like so inclusive and intergenerational, you know, like we want the like 75-year-olds there and the 2-year-olds there and like everyone in between. And it is like sometimes like gets like pigeonholed in with like a college music scene or something, I feel like, but I think that that can be proven wrong, like pretty consistently. Like thinking about shows that I've done, like, you know, like middle-aged people's like hydroponic lettuce farms or whatever. There's like, this is just like, there's so many little niches in community, and it's not at all age-based when we like zoom out and like are just willing to kind of ask different people who we might not otherwise think would be willing to do the thing, or like willing to like teach and learn from one another in that environment. And yeah, also like a thing that I didn't touch on in that previous answer that you just touched on as well is like showing up in places that like community can be built so much by showing up for like shows or events that like otherwise people might not think that you would be at, in terms of like whether that's like genre or like whatever it is about a demographic or something. I also think that like branching out among different mediums, like having like, you know, a mime or like a poet or like, you know, a dancer, like all these, we can combine these different art forms, and that like creates community that then like spreads out outside of music and into all these other realms that just creates even more impact. And yeah.
Yeah, I like thinking about that because I don't know, there's like so many articles and like um think pieces about like we're losing like third spaces and things like that, or people wanting different things. But I think some of it is true, but some of it is like people aren't willing to put themselves in an uncomfortable situation, because like anytime you meet someone new, it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's like a little nerve-wracking. But
Mhm.
I mean, you've got to do it if you want to build that community that people talk about.
Exactly. And I think there's like obviously, it gets harder and harder to be willing to reach out to like the stranger or the person that you don't know how you'll be received from, like in a time like now where we're all without we're all like with less free time than ever and like working more for less money. And so it's like, how do we use like our little spare time? And sometimes familiarity is like, so enticing in that way of like, it's like, I only have like 5 free hours this week. Like, I don't want to use them trying to like reach out to is like this person that I don't know. I'm already exhausted. And like, I just want to like see the friends that I already have. But it's like, in order to break out of the societal structure that's not serving any of us, we have to like keep covering the ground to meet and share solidarity and community with like everyone that we possibly can. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Extenuating circumstance of our times,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for the second half of the episode, you made a playlist about being on the road.
Mhm.
And you've been on what you've coined as like permatour. You've been on tour for like now 11 months. What prompted you to constantly be on the road?
Well, so it kind of came about out of a mixture of like necessity, or it started as like necessity or what I perceived as necessity, and then it carried on as like just opportunity of like, again, path of least resistance and like following the open doors. But I was I went through a breakup, and then was moving out of the house that we had shared, and didn't I already knew that I didn't want to like stay in Chicago because the amount of touring I was doing already, it was hard to come home to a place like as busy as Chicago when I felt like I just needed rest, and I have a hard time saying no when there's like something going on. And so like I wanted to come home to somewhere more still, and I had less like tethering me to Chicago than ever before. And so I was just like, well, this is my window to like move away and try something else. And I had already booked enough shows to like get me through the end of last year because I moved last November. And so went down to Texas where I'm in another band, Little Mazarn in Austin, and stayed with Lindsay, my hero, my bandmate, my best friend, at her place in Austin. And then was playing around Louisiana where I'm from. And then it was just like, I just kind of kept booking. And the more people catch a drift too, that like you're not really tethered anywhere, the more you get invited to things that are like kind of, like people didn't bat an eye at being like, can you play this show in New York in 2 weeks? And it was like, well, I don't have any reason not to. Like, why not just go, And so then I would get these anchor dates, is what I've been like calling them, like the dates that I could confirm for sure on the map. And then I could just fill in the gaps. And it just kind of kept unraveling that way. And they didn't set out on it like, I'm going to tour for a year, or anything like that. It was just like, I'm going to start touring now as a means of moving back down to the South and see if I find a spot there that feels right for me. But then instead, I feel really good at being on the road, and I feel really good at booking, and I feel like it's something that I know how to do, like better than I know how to do most things. And so just following that felt felt like the path of following the doors that were opening to me. And I think when I got around probably like month 10, I started to be like, oh, my like candle wick is really, really short now, like I'm really close to burning out. And now I just like have not been booking anything else for myself, I'll like still accept dates that are offered to me, but I've kind of burnt out a little bit on it now, and I'm going to try to hunker down for the winter somewhere. But again, with that, it's like the whole thing is just not twisting any arms, just like following invitation, following the feeling of being welcome. And so wherever I move will just be a place that I can afford to pay for rent, and that I didn't have to like seek out in a way that feels like artificial or inorganic or something, you know, just drifting like it's like a jellyfish. I'm like following following the tide, I guess.
What are the pros and cons of being on the road constantly?
The pros are that, or I'll start with the cons, right? That's what I should do. The cons are mostly just the exhaustion of, well, I think like a con is being on the road, like itself, like driving constantly every day, all the time is just dangerous. It's just dangerous. And like, I'm at the point now where I'm like, every time I get into my car, there's like this kind of thought in my head of like, well, you know, another day, like that I could like something could happen to me, and it's just me in the car. And like your odds, I just am very aware of my mortality on the road, covering like hundreds of miles every day. That feels like a con to me. Cars are such bullshit, you know. It's like we should have high speed rail. Thanks, Henry Ford. I mean, but like, I think that's the main con. And like that time driving too, you can't spend it doing anything else really, like except for like listening to an audiobook or calling on the phone, and even that is distracting. And so it's this huge chunk out of each day that is just like you're locked into doing this one thing that is inherently something that you're like risking your life to do. And also that has to take up pretty much all of your bandwidth. And I think there's also another con is just the exhaustion of like, you know, like being on tour for 11 months means that every night for the past 11 months, I've had to ask someone else to like crash on their couch or in their guest room or whatever. Like I don't feel like an extrovert, but I feel like I'm very, like it's like a high functioning introverted, like, you know, whatever, like I can turn it on, but I've had to have that turned on for almost a year now. And there's like some exhaustion around that, and like kind of pushing past whatever my personal emotional boundaries are in a moment sometimes to compromise by existing in a shared space that someone was like generous enough to offer me. And I think like, you know, it's really difficult to keep a routine of like either exercise or of like eating consistently for me, or of making sure I'm hydrated because I'm driving all the time and it sucks to pull over and pee every hour or whatever. So it's like, there's all these kind of like boundary shifts or like compromises or sacrifices that feel like are implicit to touring. And, but that also is like, you know, there's like the niceness of the routine, moving like over to the pros now. It's like the niceness of the immediate routine of like, okay, you start at point A, you get to point B, like every day. That's like built in. You have like very clear objectives, right? Of like what needs to get done at any given time. It's like very immediate. And then it's also the biggest pro is just like the everyday miracle, right? Of like, people more than music even, and like why I feel like I tour is to be reminded every day of like the capacity for human generosity and like human goodness. Like it makes me feel like we are predisposed to goodness, like as a species, like as humankind. And it's really hard to stay in touch with that for me when I'm like at home or like isolating or tapped into like an abysmal news cycle, or like, you know, like this is like every day I'm holding in my hands like the generosity that other people have offered me, whether it's a meal or a place to sleep or like the time of day or like showing up to a show. It's like I have gotten everything I need pretty much, like at least immediately in the past year from like the offerings of other people. And like that is like such a gift to receive, and also has been such a gift for me to like feel really exercised now in the skill of like knowing how to ask for what I need and like being willing to receive that. So yeah, and I mean another pro too is just like getting to hear music that you love like almost every night, getting to like be have this like wellspring of inspiration of like other people's company, other people's creative output, other people's like life's work, and growing in friendships in that way. You know, it's like kind of laying everything bare. You get to like engage with these artworks that are like often so deeply vulnerable and like at the like, you know, they're like at the like the deepest part of people's passion, and like getting to meet people that way is so special, and getting to like bond with people and like grow in relationships that way is so special.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think it's like it's at the vast end of I like the vast it's at either side of like this very vast spectrum where it's like there's a lot of loneliness but also so much community, and there's like a lot of exhaustion but also so much exhilaration and inspiration, and it kind of like holds both ends of extreme truths in this way that is like very singular and unique to touring and to long-term touring and to solo like touring, you know, where there's like no one else to hide behind at any given time. um yeah, I mean, that is a huge question, and I I could keep answering it, but I'll leave it there as well.
Yeah, I love that you brought up, like the kindness of other people. In Drive and Drive, like my favorite lines of it are like people are so generous, it's true, people are kind, and I can depend on change, it's constancy, it's malleable dependency, which I think is really cool. Um, because I think that's sorry. Um, um, which I think is cool to think about because I don't know, I feel like we're taught to um see the worst in people when that's really the case. I think because people are so guarded, it makes it seem like people aren't nice and generous, which they 100% are.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day, I was in Sam's Club and they don't I've I've had the bad habit of not having a card. I think it's almost been like I want to say like 4 or 5 years because I'm really bad. I lose things constantly. I'm really bad at remembering where I place something, and I'll place something horrendously. Like when I was in college, I would lose my key card all the time. I'd put it in like my drawer or something like that. So I'm the same with my debit card. So I just haven't had a physical card in years. I've only used Apple Pay.
Oh my
And if they don't have Apple Pay, I'm like, it's not meant to be. I was in Sam's Club getting a hot dog, I think, but they didn't have Apple Pay. And the lady behind me with her grandkids was like, I'll pay for you." Like if like once I got out of line, which I think is like really
God.
nice and sweet.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like I see that a lot since I've been home. I mean, I see it a lot in New York too, I think. Um,
Mhm.
but it's cool to think about small interactions, especially where you can see the kindness that people have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is so topical in so many ways too, because like hot dogs in the grocery stores, yeah. Hemlock Universe is a big fan of that. But that's so sweet that they paid for you, and I think that there are, yeah, these like little gestures of humanity and kindness and generosity that like most people are willing to offer, you know, like on any given day. And in this like media landscape, I think that really like pushes like fear and like isolation. It's like, you know, like I grew up in a family that's like pretty, I feel like I grew up in a household that was like pretty susceptible to that kind of like fear-based narrative. And it just always felt like there's like no way, right? Like there's like no way that we're all just like out to get each other and that like I need to be scared to walk down the street, right? Like, and I feel like in the past year of doing this whole thing, I have not felt like genuinely threatened or like made to feel like I was in danger like one time, you know? It's like, and I feel like it's something that I feel really relieved to have proven wrong for myself so consistently. And I think that, you know, like the more screens that we have, the less we have to like go outside and talk to one another, you know, whether it's like on a plane or like on a bus or to our neighbor or whatever. Like the more that we can kind of fall prey to this narrative that like it's all dog eat dog and like there's like more to fear than there is to like relish or like offer one another or to trust about one another. And yeah, it's like, yeah, it feels like the bummer of a lifetime that so many of us like feel so so much isolation and fear around like our neighbors and like the things that we don't know. And I think, yeah, like this is a relatively safe way to challenge that. And yeah, people are good. I'm reading this book by Ross Gay right now, The Book of Delights, and he has like this one passage in it too where he like talks about the little moments of trust. I've been reading it for the first time by like reading a passage from it aloud each night, like on the mic at a show. Like I'll have someone pick a passage and then I'll read it. But there was one the other night about trains and like how on trains we like leave our bag on this chair to like go to the bathroom or whatever, you know, like there's like some inherent trust in this like kind of contained environment that we don't even exercise like at a cafe sometimes. But he like talks about, you know, the ways that the trust comes up in our society of like, you know, merging at a zipper, like alternating cars, you know, like get in lanes, like things like that. Like, and he says in the book, like that any, I'm going to just like pull it up really quick because I think I have the book right here. But he basically says it's a lot, anything that leads us to believe that, that caretaking is not like our default is a lie. Where is it? It's yeah. The point is that in almost every instance of our lives, our social lives, we are, if we pay attention, in the midst of an almost constant, if subtle, caretaking, holding open doors, offering elbows at crosswalks, letting someone else go first, helping with the heavy bags, reaching what's too high or what's been dropped, pulling someone back to their feet, stopping at the car wreck, at the struck dog, the alternating merge, also known as the zipper. This caretaking is their default mode, and it's always a lie that convinces us to act or believe otherwise. Always. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you know, this thing of like, we're here to take care of one another. Like, we don't need to believe the fear-based narrative. It's just full of fallacy. And like, I think, yeah, we can depend on each other. And that's been the biggest takeaway from the whole touring thing.
Yeah. I feel like when I was younger, I used to listen to a lot of true crime. And I think that like fear-mongers like so many people badly. And I feel like looking at statistics honestly is helpful because like I've lived in cities where it's like a dangerous city, but I don't think relatively bad things are inherently going to happen to you just by like walking down your street, you know? Yeah. It's more likely nothing will happen than something will happen.
Mm-hmm. Or somebody will pay for your hot dog. You know? I feel like the paying it forward is always like more likely than the extreme, like, you know, like a moment of like violence or fear. Yeah.
And then what's your favorite memory from being on the road?
Oh my gosh.
You can list it also if you want to.
There's this, you know, phenomena that I've been experiencing where like I almost feel like Kurt Vonnegut character or something like in like Slaughterhouse-Five where I'm like moving through space and time in this very non-linear way. Like it makes everything kind of like blur together in this like extreme way where like it's like a bunch of different colors of Play-Doh all just like being pushed into this big ball. And so like these kinds of questions of like favorite memory are so hard to access, but one that is immediately coming to mind from recently is I was in Eugene, Oregon. Okay, well, for the month of September, I left my car in Pittsburgh and I left my guitar in Pittsburgh at a friend's house. And then I like had to borrow instruments for all the shows that I was playing and like bum rides the whole time. And so that month, like, just really pushed the like generosity meter to like its all-time high, right? Like, all of a sudden, I was like not even able to provide my own travel. And so there was like some really sweet shows that came out of that from like, I'm thinking of on Whidbey Island, my friend Alexandre and his band Floating Clouds. Like we played out on Whidbey Island. We like took the ferry together and like wrote a song together like 5 minutes after we arrived to our first gig in Seattle. And like it was just like a very collaborative, very playful time. And that stands out to me. And you're like playing a bamboo flute that they made like they were Alexandre, they were playing a bamboo flute that they'd made in their parents' yard. And then also there was another thought there. Oh yeah, we bought like a Mad Libs book and we were doing Mad Libs. So it just felt very like childlike and playful in this way. And then also in Eugene, Oregon, I met up with this touring crew from New Mexico, and it was this person, my friend Adam's birthday. And I didn't know that we were like had just met, that night, and or like we were meeting for the second time, and we ended up like staying up late and like balancing on the whole band, like balanced on this seesaw, like in the park for like 30 minutes. We were just like trying to keep the balance as long as we could on this like tandem seesaw. And then like he read everyone Goosebumps to go to bed. And like we ate this like carrot cake that their friends like had gotten. And there's like all these, there's like no shortage. Like all these things, I guess, sound relatively mundane, but it's like they're the most like beautiful things about it. It's just these moments of like extreme human connection and like playfulness. It's when I feel like the most childlike. I think that those are my favorite memories of tour, because you're just like getting to like fully surrender to like wonder, like just like let it wash over you. And like there was a moment of playing bass in a tour van in Egypt, like practicing with my friends Julie and Tiff for Julie Odell's shows that we were playing together in Egypt. And that was like so surreal, like sitting backwards in a van, like playing like bass, we're all singing along and like just like zipping through these roads in Cairo. So crazy. That was like a relatively recent one. And then there's just too many to name. Anytime I can swim is pretty high up there on the list. And like, people surprising me in places that I don't expect them is always really lovely. Or like the nights that you meet someone that you don't expect to have such a strong connection with, and they're all like out of nowhere, you've like been drinking tea and talking until 7 a.m, and it doesn't matter that you lost the sleep, it's all about the people is the thing. And like so many of my favorite memories were not like the shows themselves necessarily. It's like the interactions that happen after the show or before the show, or
That's awesome. You have anchors in Chicago, in Austin, Texas, and Louisiana. What makes these places home to you?
Mm-hmm. So I feel like I have even like more, homes in my heart than that. Like living in the Pacific Northwest for a while too, I still feel like a big chunk of my heart is in Astoria. And lately I feel like I've been pulled towards Appalachia. And so my heart's like revved up to head in that general direction, lower Appalachia. But Louisiana is where I grew up. It's where I was born and raised. My folks are there. Like I'm always gonna return there. I have a storage unit there. That's where all my shit is right now. It's in my hometown. And then I have like, some long-standing friends in New Orleans. And so it's like that's a place that I know that if I have to bail, like I'll be received even if I'm like sleeping on the floor somewhere. And then in Texas, it's in Austin, and the Little Mazarn band is such a big part of my heart and my life and has been for 5 years now. That's like the first tour I ever went on was with Little Mazarn. And so Lindsay is like one of the most formative like people in my life. And I feel like I can always come home to her. She's like going to be a consistent presence in my life. Like she has been since we met, and she always will be. And so there's like, she makes my home there, and like the community that I've built around being able to be there through her welcoming me home, feels like that keeps that on the map for me. And then Chicago is the place that I lived the longest, other than my hometown. So it was like this kind of like, spending 3 years somewhere, and having the band based there too. So like, again, a lot of it is more like people based than like place based, is what makes it feel like home. But, other than like the case of Louisiana, which I mean is also people based too because of my family, but it's just like where I'm from, but I love, the South feels like home to me. The Midwest, my body never fully settled into it. It was like a different feeling in my body, but there's people there that I call home. But the place, like, I mean, I love Lake Michigan, but that was kind of like the only place my body could feel at rest. And even then, it's like you have the city at your back a lot of the time. And yeah, so another anchor, like, but just further away is like around Astoria. Around Astoria in Seattle, like just the Pacific Northwest at large. And there's like plenty more smaller anchors, but yeah, the big three are those that you listed. And it's just a combination of having somewhere to land and having people to come back to. It's what makes a place feel like home.
Yeah. And I want to go through your playlist a little bit. Like, what are some of your favorite songs, or like what made you put some tracks on this playlist?
Yeah. Okay. So it's like it follows a narrative arc, which like I put them in an order that's like kind of starts with like the excited, like like leaving to set out on the road, and like the appealing things about the road, and like driving, and like there's like it starts with like kind of a hopeful tone of like the things that you like about being on the road, and then it kind of gets a little like existential, or like a little bit more like, okay, like what does it mean to be on the road? Like there's Maria by Lucinda Williams is the 7th track on the playlist, and it's like that's my favorite song of hers. And she's got this line, the second verse of that song just like make me cry. At a moment's notice, she says like, Maria, is loneliness a virtue, or does it steal you blind and leave you split apart? Maria, can you give me an answer? Are the songs we sing worth a broken heart? And so it's like these sentiments of like, you kind of give up everything to be on the road, and like, what is it for? Like, what are you doing this for? And there's like another line in that song, the highway has always been your lover, and someday you may know his name. Wherever you stay doesn't really matter because all those cities start to look the same. So it's like, a lot of the songs touch on like grappling with the like difficulties of being on the road and like what you do give up to be there. And then I tried to include, like friends songs about driving. There's like Greg Freeman and Squirrel Flower and Sleeper's Bell and Little Kid. And then it kind of unfolds from like the excitement of being on the road. You're like doing the thing, and it's so like beautiful and wonderful and like wild. And then like the things that I've been grappling with or like struggling with lately about being on the road, and the loneliness of it, the like kind of like sort of what is the word that I'm looking for? Like a kind of like daunting undertone of like driving all the time. Like that song Shadows by Dear Nora. They say like towards the end of that song, what used to be America is just a place to drive, or like, I don't know, there's all these lines that are like very like explicitly referencing driving um and like the American landscape, I guess, specifically too. And there's like Neil Young's Albuquerque, in which he says like towards the end, he's like, I'll stop when I can find some fried eggs and country ham. I'll find somewhere where they don't care who I am. So he's like grappling with anonymity on the road. There's like all these kind of like zoom ins and zoom outs. There's the 15-minute long I Dream a Highway by Gillian Welch, which is just like a masterwork. And then Little Mazarn, Lonesome Dove is like, it's like towards the end of the playlist, it gets towards the like coming home feeling, right? Like you like are like pining to come home. You've been on the road and that's beautiful, but like you got to return somewhere. And that Little Mazarn song says like, when you come home on some misty morning, don't tell me the road broke your heart. You can always come home, Lonesome Dove. And so like, it's like, like the home stretch and then getting home, and then it ends with On the Road Again by Willie Nelson, because like, of course, as soon as you get home, then you like, just like can't wait to get on the road again. But all the songs, yeah, I'm really just riffing on this right now. But the point is, if you listen to it, it just like follows the excitement and the burnout of being on the road, and of like leaving home, and then of coming home again, and then wanting to leave again ultimately. It's got some like goofy ones in there, like friggin' Life is a Highway by Rascal Flatts, but it's like feel good road songs and then like feel like heartache road songs. And there's one in there that's not an explicit road song. It's Big Nothing by the Roaches. And it's just like, I love the Roaches. And I always sing Big Nothing to myself when I'm driving through like Plainsland, where everything's flat and the sky is so huge. It's like a big nothing. So that song's not about driving, but to me, it's always felt about driving. And yeah. So Far Away by Carole King. She says, I sure hope the road don't come to own me. That's like, whew,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a lot of road songs. I'll lay off. I'll lay off now. I'm just yapping at you.
Yeah, I love the picks from Squirrel Flower. When this album, like Planet I came out, I was like listening to that on repeat.
Yeah, it's like a great dystopian album. So yeah, Squirrel Flower and Dear Nora are holding down our like dystopia songs about the road on that playlist. And yeah.
And I recently like got into Greg Freeman, and Long Distance Driver is like my favorite song of his. Like
Yeah.
like a lot of my friends like for the past year have been telling me to listen to Greg Freeman, but I finally like caught them live at something, and I was just like, wow, this is like crazy.
Yeah.
Songwriting and like drawn out chords and the guitar playing. It's cool.
Yeah.
Like in Vermont, crazy things are happening there.
I know the Burlington scene is holding it down. They're all, yeah, Greg's a dear friend, and Lily as well, and that whole kind of crew. But yeah, Greg is like so fantastic. Hemlock. We've shared a bill with him. That's like how we met a couple of times. And then yeah, I actually have a bumper sticker of his. It says Long Distance Driver. So,
yeah, I feel like we're in like a indie country folk boom of artists.
Oh yeah.
With like
the alternative or whatever they're calling it.
Alternative. I like that. Yeah. Like with Lily's album this year, and then Merce Lemon's album that just recently came out, and like the two projects that you've dropped. And then like MJ Lenderman, of course, but a lot of y'all artists.
Yeah. They're like boot gaze. I've like heard all these names. Yeah, there's like boot gaze, y'all alternative, all that kind of thing. Yeah, I just left Merce's house yesterday. It's funny.
Yeah. And then is there anything that you want to plug or, shout out?
Yeah, let me think. November 7th, anyone who's in Austin, Texas, there's going to be like this show that I'm really, really thrilled about with Little Mazarn and Hemlock. So, like, both of the bands I play in, and Jolie Holland, who's like a legend. That's going to be at Central Presbyterian Church. And then there's like the album release show on in Chicago. That's just like the full band reunion, first time playing together since June. And that will be December 12th, 2024, 12/12. Easier to remember. And that's a Constellation with NC. And then, yeah, keep an ear out for another Song a Day album, because I'll be chugging along through November writing a song a day. And so that'll come out in December. Yeah, I mean, there's like the stuff coming up this week. I'll be playing with Allegra and Greg, but I imagine that's like, that'll be in the past by the time we're listening to this. So, yeah, that December date feels like a good one. 12/12 album release show, 11/7 in Texas, and then a Song a Day album in between. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been fun having you on.
Thank you so much for your time. I like answer things so long and I'm so aware of it. So thanks for your patience with me. And yeah, it was great talking to you. And I'm a big fan of the podcast and the other friends that you had on it. And yeah, I appreciate you.
Thanks. Awesome.